Actually, Judy asked me to talk about the differences between men and women, and then she said, make sure that it has to do with ministry, and then I thought she said, deal with differences between any kind of people and any other kind of people, but now she's gone back to men and women, so I'm not quite sure where I am. You've got in your packet...
No, some of them don't have their packets yet. Your notes, we're handing them out separately. They're not even included in the packet, so we're getting ready to hand those out right now.
Can you hand them out? Can you hand them out right now so people? Okay. Okay. Hopefully this will not be too noisy. This topic's a lot of fun. It's also pretty serious in many ways. But I want to start with a couple of passages of Scripture. 1 Peter 3:7 is one of them. This is talking about husbands and wives. It says, in the same way, you husbands, first talking about how Sarah obeyed Abraham. Then it says, in the same way, you husbands must live with your wives with proper understanding that they are the weaker sex. We'll come back to that because I think it's only partly true. Treat them with respect. This is what we are supposed to do as husbands, because they also will receive together with you God's gift of life. So do this so that nothing will interfere with your prayers. We're probably mostly unaware of the fact that if we don't treat each other right, that this has it has spiritual consequences. Personally, I believe that everything we do on earth has some kind of spiritual ramifications. There's ramifications in the spirit world, and so it's kind of interesting here and in other places that the authors of Scripture talk specifically or say specifically something like this: treat each other well, so that nothing will interfere with your prayers. I wonder how many of our prayers have been messed up in one way or another because we have not treated our spouse well, or perhaps even parents and children. And then if you look at Ephesians 5, you've got another passage here that I think is quite important. And it starts out, verse 21 of Ephesians 5, I think it starts out with the basic rule, and that is, submit yourselves one to the other. Submit yourselves one to the other because of your reverence for Christ. And I get a little impatient with a teaching that refers to submission as going only one way. That's definitely not scriptural, and it misses the whole point. Now, I'm an anthropologist as well as involved in ministry like this, and one of the things we find in looking at the cultures of the world is that there is one person in society more important by far than anybody else, and that's the women. The most important people in any society are the women. And so the way the Scripture sets this up is in order to protect the most important members of society, especially during child-rearing years, he sets men up as the guards around the castle. So if you have a castle, which is more important, the king or the guards? Somebody say the guards? No, obviously the king is the most important, and the reason the guards are there is to protect the king. And the guards, this is the job that God has given us as men, to be the guards around the castle. And unfortunately, we have misused that very often. And probably a major reason for that is that we're scared of women. Maybe you gals didn't know that we're scared of you. Or maybe you do.
You don't act like you're scared of me.
We're not necessarily scared of all women, but scared of women in general. So anyway, this passage, it starts with the basic thing: submit to each other because of your reverence for Christ. Then it says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as to the Lord, for a husband has authority over his wife. Now notice, authority does not mean greater value. It just means that the way God set it up, he had to have something for men to do. See, because we don't get to do much. We get to do, dumb things like having a job, or, traveling, or, nothing really important. So he tries to balance it out and says, okay, women have the real important stuff to do, and so let's give men the job of guarding them, because that's kind of important too. And so we have that division of labor. Unfortunately, and I'll get to this a little bit later, unfortunately our society has tried to blot out the role differences and to press everybody into the same mold, which is a very serious problem. The way we do this is on the basis of a bad definition of equality, where when we say people should be equal, usually what we mean is people should be the same. What hasn't occurred to us oftentimes is that people can be totally equal and thoroughly different. And that's the way God made us. To be totally equal, each just as valuable as everybody else, but completely different. And we'll get into those differences in a little while. So it says, a husband has authority over his wife, just as Christ has authority over the church, and Christ is himself the Savior of the church, his body. So we men are supposed to be the Savior of our wives. Another place, we are to give ourselves to our wives as Jesus gave himself to the church. This is, the fact that these things are in Scripture, really, I just stand in amazement at those that try to say, men should be always superior to women, and women shouldn't have, shouldn't duck their heads out of their homes and all that kind of stuff. So then it says, wives submit to their husbands. Then verse 25, husbands, love your wives. Love is probably a bigger command than submit by a long shot. Love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave his life for it. He did this to dedicate the church to God by his word, after making it clean by washing it in water, in order to present the church to himself in all its beauty, pure and faultless, without spot or wrinkle or any other imperfection. Now, I don't know what the implications of this might be, presenting our wives without wrinkle, but that maybe that's what's implied here. Heard one woman said, she's in her 50s, she said, I'm just as beautiful as I was when I was in my 20s, it just takes me longer to get there. And then verse 28, men ought to love their wives just as they love their own bodies, or their own selves. A man who loves his wife loves himself. Now, with that serious note to start on, I want to turn to something that you'll probably all recognize. I mean, you may not have heard the story that I'm about to read to you, but you'll probably be able to identify with parts of it, because, as you see on at the top of your notes, men and women are very different. You've noticed that, have you? And we'll get into the details. Now, this is a story of two people, Roger and Elaine, and it's written by a fellow named Dave Barry, who is a humorist. Do you know that name? He writes some very funny stuff, and you may have read this. It was in Reader's Digest in 1996. So I'll read it just for the fun of it. Contrary to what many women believe, it's easy to develop a long-term, intimate, and mutually fulfilling relationship with a guy. Of course, the guy has to be a Labrador Retriever. With human guys, it's extremely difficult. This is because guys don't really grasp what women mean by the word relationship. Now, any of you women would be able to kind of confirm that in your own experience? That us guys, we really don't know what relationship is all about. So here's going to be an illustration of an attempted relationship. Let's say a guy named Roger asks a woman named Elaine out to a movie. She accepts and they have a pretty good time. A few nights later, he asks her out to dinner, and again they enjoy themselves. They continue to see each other regularly, and soon neither is seeing anybody else. Then one evening, when they're driving home, a thought occurs to Elaine. She says, "Do you realize that we've been seeing each other for exactly 6 months?" Silence fills the car. To Elaine, it seems like a very loud silence. She thinks to herself, "Geez, I wonder if it bothers him that I said that. Maybe he feels confined by our relationship. Maybe he thinks I'm trying to push him into some kind of obligation." And Roger is thinking, "Gosh, 6 months?" And Elaine is thinking, "But hey, I'm not so sure I want this kind of relationship either. Are we heading towards marriage, towards children, towards a lifetime together? Am I ready for that level of commitment? Do I really even know this person?" And Roger is thinking, so that means it was, let's see, February when we started going out? Which was right after I had the car at the dealer's, which means, let me check the odometer. Whoa, I'm way overdue for an oil change here. And Elaine is thinking, he's upset. I can see it on his face. Maybe I'm reading this completely wrong. Maybe he wants more from our relationship, more intimacy, more commitment. Maybe he senses my reservation. Yes, that's it. He's afraid of being rejected. And Roger is thinking, I'm going to have them look at the transmission again. I don't care what those morons say, it's still not shifting right. And they better not try to blame it on the cold weather this time. It's 87 degrees out, and this thing is shifting like a garbage truck, and I paid those incompetent thieving cretins $600. And Elaine is thinking, he's angry, and I don't blame him. I'd be angry too. I feel so guilty putting him through this. But I can't help the way I feel. I'm just not sure. And Roger is thinking, they'll probably say it's only a 90-day warranty. That's what they're going to say. And Elaine is thinking, maybe I'm too idealistic, waiting for a knight to come riding up on his horse, on his white horse, when I'm sitting next to a perfectly good person who's in pain because of my self-centered schoolgirl fantasy. And Roger is thinking, warranty? I'll give them a warranty. Roger, Elaine says aloud. What? Says Roger. I'm such a fool, Elaine says, sobbing. I mean, I know there's no knight and there's no horse. There's no horse, says Roger. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to go through this with a straight face. So she says, there's no horse, says Roger. You think I'm a fool, don't you, Elaine says. No, Roger says, glad to know the correct answer. It's just that I need some time, Elaine says. There's a 15-second pause while Roger tries to come up with a safe response. Yes, he finally says. Elaine, deeply moved, touches his hand. Oh, Roger, do you really feel that way? What way, says Roger. That way about time, Elaine says. Oh, says Roger, yes. Elaine gazes deeply into his eyes, causing him to become very nervous about what she might say next. Oh, dear. Especially if it involves a horse. At last she says, thank you, Roger. Thank you, he responds. Does this sound familiar at all? she's afraid she's hurt him and he's just thinking about the car. Okay. Then he takes her home and she lies on her bed, a conflicted soul, weeping until dawn. Whereas when Roger gets back to his place, he opens a bag of chips, turns on the TV, and immediately becomes deeply involved in a rerun of a tennis match between two Czech players that he never heard of before. A tiny voice in his mind tells him that something major was going on back there in the car. But he figures it's better not to think about it. Now this is fairly typical, I think. The next day, Elaine will call her closest friend, and they will talk for 6 straight hours. In painstaking detail, they will analyze everything she said and everything he said. They will continue to discuss. My eyes keep getting fogged over. They'll continue to discuss this subject for weeks, never reaching any definite conclusions, but never getting bored with it either. Meanwhile, Roger, playing racquetball one day with a friend of his and Elaine's, will pause just before serving and ask, "Norm, did Elaine ever own a horse?" He says, we're not talking about different wavelengths here. We're talking about different planets and completely different solar systems. And men are from Mars and women are from Venus, kind of thing. Elaine cannot communicate meaningfully with Roger because the sum total of his thinking about relationships is, huh? He has a guy brain, basically an analytical, problem-solving organ. It's not comfortable with nebulous concepts such as love, need, and trust. If the guy brain has to form an opinion about another person, it performs its based, let's see, boy, that's what happens when you have to get up early in the morning. Your eyes burn when you start crying. Or laughing, yeah. If a guy brain has to form an opinion about another person, it prefers to base it on facts such as his or her earned run average. In baseball. Women have trouble accepting this. They're convinced that guys must spend a certain amount of time thinking about the relationship. How could a guy see another human being day after day, night after night, and not be thinking about the relationship? This is what women figure. They're wrong. A guy in a relationship is like an ant standing on the top of a truck tire. The ant is aware that there's something large here, but he cannot even dimly comprehend what it is. Thanks. And if the truck starts moving and the tire starts to roll, the ant will sense that something important is happening. But right up until he rolls around to the bottom and is squashed, the only thought in his brain will be, huh? He's talking about a guy brain and a gal brain here. Thus, the number one tip for women to remember is never assume the guy understands that you and he have a relationship. You have to plant the idea in his brain by constantly making subtle references to it, such as, Roger, would you mind passing me the sugar in as much as we have a relationship? Or, wake up, Roger. There's a prowler in the den, and we have a relationship. You and I do, I mean. Or, good news, Roger. The doctor says we're going to have our 4th child. Another indication we have a relationship. Or, Roger, inasmuch as this plane is crashing and we only have a minute to live, I want you to know that we've had a wonderful 53 years of marriage together, which clearly constitutes a relationship. He says, never let up, women. Pound away relentlessly at this concept, and eventually it will start to penetrate the guy's brain. Someday he might even start thinking about it on his own. He'll be talking with some other guys about women, and out of the blue he'll say, Elaine and I, we have this thing. And he will sincerely mean it. Anybody here that can identify with that? Now, I don't know why God did this to us. I hope, hope we've got about 10,000 years to talk it over. Just us guys and God. I mean, you women will have to have your own conversation with him. But he made us basically incompatible. And he probably smiled and said, let's see what they do about that. Now, what I'd like to look at these notes for is to kind of focus a little bit on differences between us. Most of it is on differences between men and women, but then we broaden out to other things, and to think about areas in which people can be damaged, and secondly, insights into how we can help people in these areas. Now, as I've said, we're very different. We're basically incompatible. Women are weird and men are a mess. Most of you will agree with that. And it's hard to figure each other out. Now, I think the aim here is to enjoy the differences. I've been trying for 46 years actually 49 years. My wife and I met in college, and I went with her 3 years, and she went with me 2. Fortunately, it was the last 2. And then we've been married now for 46 years. And I've given up trying to figure her out, but just decided to, smile and, go at it that way. Do you know that every cell in our bodies is different? Those that, if there's like a dead body and they don't know whether it's a man or woman, they just have to check out on the cells, and the cells in a female's body are completely different from the cells in a male's body. That's kind of interesting. But also just about every thought in our minds is different. And that's sometimes more disturbing. Biological differences. Our bodies are different, other than the obvious sexual characteristics. Men's physical strength tends to be greater, but women's endurance of pain and difficulty tends to be greater than men. You seem to be able to put up with more pain. Men have more muscle, hairy, rough skin, higher ratio of muscle to fat. And you're not going to like this one. Women have a layer of fat just under the skin. That's what makes your skin soft and smooth. And guys like that. Men have thicker skin and thicker bones, more endurance. Women wrinkle earlier than men. Men breathe more deeply than women, but women breathe more often. Interesting. Our brains are different. Men's brains are split. We're born brain damaged. And it's our mother's fault. See, because during the gestation process, our mothers shoot out some kind of a chemical, and if the baby is a girl, it doesn't affect the brain. If it's a guy, splits it. So we end up with a split brain. That means that men become mono-minded and women are stereo-minded. Now, I need to say this, that these are kind of general things, and human beings are flexible enough so that some of you women have probably learned how to be, more on the male side of this, to use your whole brain to, fake people out, kind of, and think like men do. And the fact is that our schools have trained all of you gals to think like men. This is one of the tyrannies of our culture that I think we need to regret very, very much. That we're all trained to think the same way, and it's based on male thinking, male logic. And if you've survived in school, you gals, it's because you've learned to think like a man, at least in school, and then outside of school, if you haven't forgotten how to think like a woman, and then you think like a woman. So you've become sort of more than you were before, but it is a kind of a tyranny, I think. So these are generalities, but in general, a guy is mono-minded, focused in on one thing. Women, you carry the whole world with you all the time. We men are either right brain, totally, almost totally right brain, or totally left brain. But you guys are, got the whole thing. A woman usually can't forget one area of life while doing something else. And he probably can test that. Probably most of us men here are focused in on what's happening in this room only. And I know sometimes it's scary. I can forget my wife and children and grandchildren and everything else in my life and focus completely. I mean, this is the mono-minded kind of a thing. But probably those of you women who have maybe some difficulty at home or whatever, you carry that whole thing right into the room here, and it's kind of hard to get your attention sometimes. You have to wave our arms and, another concomitant of this is that women tend to be a little more serious, I think, than men. It's sometimes don't even get jokes. This is why a woman can go shopping for a dress and come home with a gift for a neighbor's baby. That doesn't make any sense to a guy. You went for a dress. Why didn't you come back with a dress? Because we go hunting. And that's we'll come back. And this is why women can change the subject in the middle of a sentence. Boy, I was riding with my wife one time, and she's talking about somebody. I'll call her Mary. And Mary is, 65-ish, and all kinds of health problems and stuff. But all of a sudden, Mary's pregnant. I'm saying, Mary's pregnant? Oh, this is a different Mary. Now, how many times a day does that happen? Now, I'll come home at night and my wife will say, "Did you bring it?" Okay. Now, if I'm lucky, I can remember the last 15 minutes of my life. And here I'm supposed to remember whatever we were talking about in the morning. And, she gets a little impatient if I don't remember what it is. Or, it's typical, especially of young wives. Older ones tend to get over this, but younger wives, they say, "Okay, you've been at work all day. Were you thinking about me?" And that the guy is nailed. I mean, if you tell the truth, you've had it. Because the fact is, you haven't been thinking about her. You've been mono-minded, focused in on what you're doing, and and that, of course, is an insult to her because she's been. The whole world with her, she's been thinking about you all day, and that's just a major difference. Okay, so men are mono-minded, women are stereo-minded. In ministry, then, you've got this kind of difference. It can come out. You're listening to a person's story, and a guy can zero in on something, and a lot of times miss real important stuff because he's, okay, this is supposed to be ministry. I've got a fear problem. I'm going to get over my fear problem, and not even mention the anger and resentment and other kinds of things because he's focused in on it. On the other hand, a woman, you start her talking, and it's really hard to turn her off. I mean, she's expanding on things. The guy is bottom line. Go right to the point, and maybe miss more important points. The woman, of course, all the important points get lost in the verbiage. She's going on and on and on. So a lot of times, I'll be ministering. I'll say, "Okay, let's hang on now. You've been talking for 15 minutes, and I'm not going to remember this stuff. So let's do something now." But you haven't heard the important parts of the story yet, kind of thing. Anyway, these kinds of things can come up in ministry. Another thing that can come up in ministry is that a lot of times a guy will sort of brush over things and figure that that's not very important because he's not into the details. He's missing a lot of details, especially with regard to feelings. Feelings, what's that? That kind of thing. Okay, second thing to say about differences, men are competitors, women are contributors, especially in relationship. Men set out to conquer. When men shop, we set out to get a certain thing, and by golly, we're going to get it. We go to get it, and if our wife said bring something else home, we've forgotten that, so we just got the thing that we set out to get. So we have to make another trip. Now, when we go on a trip, and you've probably all experienced this, we've got to get from point A to point B just as quickly as possible. We don't know why we're getting there, but we got to get there. We got to beat everybody else there. And our wife says, "Let's stop for lunch." Stop for lunch? What am I going to do about all these people that we just passed? They're going to get ahead of us. Anybody identify with this? This is just incredible. And then of course, if we're lost, stop for directions. Oh no, because that's admitting failure. See, we're supposed to conquer it. We're supposed to figure it out by ourselves, kind of a deal. The other day we were looking for a place, and we were kind of lost. And my wife says, "Why don't you stop and ask somebody?" And I said, "Okay, dear, it's totally against my nature, but I'm just going to swallow my pride, and we're going to stop here and ask." Well, she was happy, but I felt defeated. I just felt like I'd failed the whole day, kind of thing, because I didn't figure it out myself. Then when I got the directions, I knew I could have figured it out myself. If I'd just taken one more corner, I would have gotten there, and I wouldn't have had to, ask for directions. So we go shopping, we go hunting. Women go shopping, For women, it's the process that's important. And if you're on a trip, it's the process, and stopping for lunch or for a bathroom stop or whatever. That's part of the process, and that's all part of the experience. But we sit there, when are we going to have this lunch over? I gotta pass some more people. Dear, winning is crucial to us men, and this has some interesting things. Winning a woman is that's crucial. But as soon as we've won her, then you look for the next thing to conquer. Now, I think this is a design defect that God has, put into men, because not valuing the relationship so much, but just valuing the conquest. It sets us up for some difficult times if we don't understand what's going on. So once we've succeeded in one thing, we're liable to look for another thing to conquer, and to take our wives for granted. And I won't ask for testimonies here, but there probably are a number of you that are saying inside, "Yeah, that's what's going on." Now, men like to think things through. Women like to talk things through. And boy, if this isn't aggravating. My wife, she comes up with a problem, and I get silent, which is aggravating to her. I don't know why, but I get silent because I'm trying to figure it out. And she says, sometimes we sit in the car, we're driving along, and there's something that she wants to. Anyway, she looks over at me and says, "Talk, talk. What are we going to talk about? I'm figuring something out here," kind of thing. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know what I'm thinking." Thinking, Then I commit the horrible crime. I say, if you're the one that wants to talk, then talk. I'll listen. I'm better at listening than I am at talking, and she's better at talking sometimes. But we're fixers. Under stress, we try to fix the circumstances, or if we can't, to throw something or punch something. Now, this relates to the fact that men are visual as well, and we'll get to that in a moment. It seems just as a release to that tool that's not working, to throw it, or punch a wall or something like that. Just to do something that I don't know why it feels better sometimes, especially if you punch the wrong wall. A cement block wall is not a good thing to punch. Under stress, of course, women tend to get talkative, and that bugs the daylights out of me. My wife said, "Talk, quiet. I'm trying to figure something out." She's going to talk, but I've learned to, at least be quiet. I can't claim to always be listening. Then she says, why? And if I've lost track of what she's talking about, I'm in trouble. Okay, men are visual, women are verbal. This is why women know instinctively that they need to take care of their looks, because they know that men are better at seeing than they are at thinking. I mean, you want to be better looking rather than more knowledgeable, kind of thing. Women, of course, are verbal. Men are moment-oriented. Women tend to be future-oriented. The best evidence of this, of course, is that women carry a purse. Guy just carries a wallet, and in the wallet you've got 2 credit cards and a little bit of money, and that should take care of the present. But a woman's always thinking of the future, and so she's got this enormous purse with everything that she could possibly need at any time in the future. Something there for every potential problem with everybody that she's liable to run into, and especially if you have little kids, of course, not only a purse but diaper bags. And my younger daughter's just had her first child. My older daughter's had 8, so she's not so bad at this. But my younger daughter, she has to carry an incredible amount of equipment. They're thinking of getting a trailer to carry, whenever they travel anywhere. But we're pretty much in the moment, like you heard in that story, and women are thinking of the future and making up a lot of it, actually. Women tend to remember better than men. That's not a surprise to any of you gals, is it? I just want you to know that we've got an excuse. It's because we're brain damaged, or maybe brain dead, maybe. But that God made us this way. Especially women, especially remember things pertaining to people, but tend to worry about some things when they're supposed to be thinking about other things. This is another thing for ministry. If you're ministering to a woman, always look for worry, anxiety, fear, these kinds of things that relate to the future. They're likely to be there. How many of you gals have a problem with worry and are willing to admit it? There's a guy raised his hand too. How many of you have a problem with worry but you don't want to admit it? Worry is a very, very female thing. I'm not saying that men never have the problem, but you can expect it very in probably most any women. Women tend to read between the lines of people's behavior. And may I say that the chances of your reading between the lines concerning a man are pretty slim. That is, reading accurately. Judy and I have a kind of a running little thing. She's really good at reading the wrong thing between the lines in my behavior and my words and things like that. But women aren't usually so good on technical things and numbers, except birthdays. We've got 14 grandkids, and my wife can reel off. Not only I do well to reel off the names. I can get the names okay. She's got all the birthdays down in her mind. She's carrying this with her all the time, and I don't know what she has to give up to carry that information, but but she's got birthdays, relational things. Boy, those. Okay, men can forget things easier, especially anniversaries and birthdays. You may have heard about this, the woman that got up in the morning, she and her husband got up, and she said to her husband, "You know what day this is?" And her husband lied and said, "Yeah, I know." And he escaped out the door and off to work. And he called up and had flowers sent, and he gave her a coupon to get a new dress and chocolates in the afternoon. And he got back home, and she said, "Oh, this has been a really good day." And said, yeah, did you get the flowers? Yeah. Did you get the dress? Yeah. Did you get the chocolates? He said, yeah. And she says, this is the best Groundhog's Day I've ever experienced. Men tend to be so focused on what they're into at any given moment that they forget everything else. And I mentioned this, the young wife asks if her husband's been thinking about her, and chances are he hasn't been. Mental and emotional differences. Men tend to focus on things. It's kind of interesting, they've done studies with little boys and little girls, and little boys tend to draw, automobiles and trains and airplanes and things like this, and little girls tend to draw people. From childhood, little boys like to take things apart. They're often not too good at putting them back together again. Little girls by nature are attracted to dolls, and this unisex kind of thing where you try to get little boys playing with dolls and little girls playing with cars and stuff is often falls afoul of the fact that by nature there are differences. You recognize, I think, that there's a lot less talk about unisex kinds of things now than there used to be, because research is showing that the differences between men and women, boys and girls, are innate, biologically and psychologically based, not as was thought before, based on the kind of upbringing that we have. Now there is stuff based on upbringing, but there's there are natural biological differences that underlie those things. Women tend to give themselves to people and often give to husbands with little appreciation and then become bitter. And so again in ministry to look for, in women especially, bitterness related to unsatisfying relationships. Whether it's to relationship with husband or relationship with mother-in-law or mother or father or whatever, to look for that kind of bitterness. Guys, on the other hand, are more likely to develop things like bitterness and resentment in relation to jobs, in relation to employment, employers, and maybe co-workers and so on. Women, of course, are more talkative than men. Women use about 15,000 words a day, men about 9,000. And the typical thing, the guy goes off to work and he uses up almost all 9,000 of his words during work. He comes back home and his wife asks him something. The only words he's got left are, yeah, dinner ready, a few things like that, because he's used up all his words. And if the wife is, an at-home mother or whatever, she may have only used about, a few hundred of her words, so she's got thousands of words left to use up on her husband. And sometimes that happens in bed, and I get in big trouble when I fall asleep on my wife. Somehow or other she doesn't like it when she's still talking and I'm snoring. A few weeks ago, I came back. I got in, after midnight or something from a trip, and she wanted to talk. And boy, as soon as I lay down, I just wanted to close my eyes, and she kept asking me questions, and well, she gave up after a while. But she's probably bitter because of it. That and 1,000 other times that's happened. From childhood, little girls use language. The fellow that I got a lot of this from said that when he and his wife would go past their little girl's room, they'd find her talking for her dolls, talking back and forth and so on. When they went by their little boy's room, he'd be going like that. It's just making noises, but she's verbal and he's noise oriented. When talking, men like to narrow things down, just to get at the basics. We are bottom line oriented. Women, of course, like to expand. And again, to mention the fellow that I got a lot of this from, he said he's got 2 daughters, and his wife and his 2 daughters came back from a shopping trip, and he said, I made the mistake of asking them, how did shopping go? And he said they started talking, and he said, just pull up a chair, you know. He just had to listen and listen and listen. He just wanted, you know, it was good. We did this and that, but he got the whole long story, and that was more than he expected. So he's learned not to ask that question. You learn things after a while. Women, of course, are more in touch with their feelings. Men, what's a feeling? A psychologist friend of ours, he likes to say, I want to meet a man someday that can tell the difference between a thought and a feeling. Says when he asks a guy how he feels, he usually tells him what he's thinking. Ask a woman how she feels, and she knows exactly how she feels. Now, I don't know, again, I don't know why God made us this different, but there's something, biological and psychological about this. When there are problems, men tend to blame others or circumstances. Women tend to blame themselves. I wouldn't push this too far. I think people are externalizers or internalizers, and I think I've worked with a lot of men who have internalized stuff, and of course a lot of women too that have internalized things. Now, men's and women's cycles are different, and I found this kind of interesting. We know, of course, a women's menstrual cycle. Some show the effects more than others. 40 to 60% of female suicides are during their period. And probably at least that many of men's suicides also during their wife's period. I heard a new definition of PMS: putting up with men's stupidity. And then these are actual studies. 60 to 85% of female crimes are committed during their menstrual period. Now, this one was new to me. Men have a daily cycle. It says hormone levels peak at about 4 a.m. and they're lowest around 8 p.m., which leads, women, if you want to really influence your man, do it after 8 o'clock when his hormone levels are down. And I don't know what that's supposedly based on some kind of research. The male cycle that I'm aware of is weekly or several times a weekly, the need for sex. That's something that tends to be different between men and women. Now, differences of needs. Our needs are different. A woman's top need, and this is based on a study also, is what we talk about, we can call affection, that is to be close to and valued by someone. And this need is provided by an environment, not simply an event. And one of the problems that we guys have is we're likely to focus in on a given event, and take our wife out and assume that she's going to interpret that as proving that we are loving and affectionate and so on, and then she might complain a day or two later and say, but I took you out last night, kind of thing. What more do you want? But a woman wants more of an environment. Now, all of these things are the seedbed for problems that we have to deal with in ministry. I can't count the number of women I've talked to who just say their husband doesn't understand them, and I say, okay, so what else is new? And of course, most men would say, my wife doesn't understand me. Okay, so what else is new? Kind of thing. And I don't say that to them actually, because what they need is understanding, not not some kind of a flip answer. This affection needs to be expressed in her language. And I make a big point of her language and his language. I notice with my wife, and I notice with others too, that her language is flowers, cards. A number of years ago, I began to realize this. I started bringing her flowers. Well, she got pretty suspicious at first. With, after 30 years of marriage, what's this guy, bringing me flowers for? But when she got on to the fact that I wasn't trying to put something over on her, I was just trying to speak her language, we kind of kid about it now. And I still try to bring her flowers fairly regularly. Helped a lot by the fact that our grocery store has a nice flower shop in it, so I don't have to go to, don't have to go shopping to get flowers, kind of thing. And when our flowers are running low, sometimes she'll just mention we need some more flowers, and she knows that I'll get them. And cards, cards. Have you sent your mother a birthday card? A birthday card, in all of my life, I never got a birthday card from my mother. Why should I send her a birthday card? Kind of thing. Well, I'm trying in my old age to recognize that my mother's language is cards also, and she's too far away to send her flowers much. But anyway, flowers and cards, treating her like a queen, helping with the chores. Drat. Would have to mention that. And basically doing things with her. Okay, a woman's second need, according to this study, is for conversation. And us guys were nailed here. Studies show that she needs 10 to 15 hours a week of conversation to feel fulfilled. Well, I hope she's got good women friends. Probably none of you are going to get that from a husband. It says most couples average about 37 minutes a week of conversation. Conversation is equated with intimacy by a woman, and it's conversation for its own sake. And my wife has a friend who has absolutely diarrhea of the vocal cords. I've never heard anybody that that can jump from one irrelevant subject to another so fast. When I get her on the phone, if my wife isn't home, I just say, "She's not home. She'll call her back tomorrow." But boy, I tell you, when she calls my wife, you can figure the phone's going to be tied up for 2 hours, and I guess they enjoy that. I don't know. I can't think of that many things to talk about. Kind of.
Your mom is still alive, because when you said she's too far away to send flowers, it kind of sounded like she's not even around. She's in heaven. Because there's no place to
all of you understood that she was geographically too far away, didn't you?
Right.
Yeah, see. Just Judy, she... no, my mom lives in Connecticut, and I live in the West Coast. My grocery store doesn't send flowers. Okay. 3,000 miles does seem like a long way for flowers. But conversation for its own sake, I don't know, probably most of us guys don't understand that at all. Because for us, conversation is a utilitarian thing. You just do it and get it over with. And I heard a pastor talking about going golfing with the guys. He says one reason guys like golf is because you have to be quiet while somebody is hitting the ball, which is most of the time. And they say, I'm going to go golfing. I'm going to make out a business deal or something like that. He says, I never heard anybody do a business deal. He says, because everybody has to be quiet all the time. He says, I don't know how women play golf. Okay, so after these things, a woman needs transparency or openness and sharing from her husband. See, and this is what really puzzles me, that God would make us this way. Financial security, her husband to be a good father. Sex is way down the list usually. Admiration and so on. Now, for you gals, men's need, I think a man's top need is encouragement. Respect, yes, but more than respect. To be appreciated, encouragement inspires him. Criticism makes him defensive, even bitter. This is the kind of thing that turns guys bitter. And in ministry, you start looking for, if a person is talking about a relationship with a guy is talking about a relationship with his wife, where he just feels like he's constantly criticized and so on. There's likely to be a deep root of bitterness there and resentment. But it needs to be communicated in his language, not hers. And the next thing on the list is probably not going to be a surprise to you women. His primary language is probably sex. So if you want to really show your appreciation. Now, the male sex drive is a major factor in our lives. And I have somewhat to discuss with God on this one too, because it's no fun. It just pressures and pressures and pressures. And this is fully as dominant, and maybe even more, in a guy's life as a woman's menstrual cycle. But the best way to show appreciation is by fully participating in the sexual part of life, not just putting up with it. I know that many mothers tell their daughters, just act like you're enjoying it, and just put up with it. But guys are, we may not be very intelligent, but we can see through that one fairly easily. But this is his language of love. And so what happens typically is a guy would like to show his love to his wife, and so he suggests sex, because he wants to communicate to her in her language, and her response is quite often, yuck, I'd rather have flowers, or something like that, because that's her language. And why God did this to us is beyond me. Now, I think the second language of a guy is his third need, and that is a companion, in the sense of somebody that will participate with him, a playmate. I can't count the times when I've really wanted my wife to be with me in a hobby or in something, and what I've learned is to do the things that she appreciates, and not to keep pushing her to do the things that I would like her to do on my side, and find a few things that we do like to do together. We like to make puzzles together and sit and play games on our computer and stuff like that. So we have found a few things. But a guy wants somebody to participate with him recreationally in things that he's into, hobby, sports, and especially this three-letter word that ends in X. Now note how these first three needs of a man cluster together: the need for encouragement, and encouragement through a satisfying participation in a sexual relationship. Then after this, the needs listed in this study were attractiveness in his wife, tenderness, domestic support, affection, conversation. And conversation is about as low on the guy's list as sex is on the gal's list. So, okay, it's break time. Is to get through just go through the rest of these notes, and there should be plenty of things to, questions and corrections and all that kind of thing. But during the break, somebody was asking me what all this might have to do with our relationship to God. And I think that's a very good question that I'd like to kind of plant in our minds, because women, being more relational and understanding relationships more, are in a much better position to have I guess we might say, satisfying relationship with God. And I know as a guy, I get really frustrated. I think I have a good relationship, but I think it ought to be better. And I think I ought to feel more about it. My feelings seem to, have a cap on them. And somebody was asking me at supper if I didn't just feel really ecstatic about what God is doing in seminars like this. And yeah, I feel as ecstatic as I can, but my ecstasy only goes about this high, and because my emotions are about like that, kind of. And sometimes, not all the time, sometimes I envy those that have way up big highs. The trouble is, people that have big highs tend to have deep lows also, and so maybe it's better to just go along like that. But my picture of myself is of a little cork bobbing along on a big river, kind of a deal. And I don't know how corks feel when they're bobbing along the river, but that's the picture that I keep getting. But we can. I think it'd be good to come back to this later when we get discussing it. Now we're on page 7 here. Personality differences. Sensitivity, of course, women sensitive to people and to appearances. Looking good. Men sensitive to things like cars, jobs, sports, stuff. Does anybody need notes? It doesn't have them. If you need them, there's plenty of copies back there. Optimism and pessimism. I've noticed that women tend to get discouraged by relational things, especially within the home, and again in ministry. When a woman comes, the chances are that there's going to be you're going to be dealing with a relational kind of a thing. Guys get discouraged about business or occupational things, and especially things outside the home. And then, of course, get upset about why our wives don't understand us more, and stuff like that. And of course, you get that from women on the other side. Seriousness, I think I mentioned women tend to be more serious than men. Men can often ignore serious problems, especially with people, and the whole business of being perceptive about people. They've done studies to show that where they show pictures to people, and women can identify the feelings of the people in the pictures something like 80% of the time, and men about 20% of the time. Something like that. It's a very, very big difference there. Compassion. Women tend to be more compassionate unless towards those they see as competitors. Now, I've mentioned men's competitiveness. I think women get to be pretty competitive too, don't you? And sometimes kind of nasty and underhanded. Guys will compete, with fists, but women, boy, they got a way of slicing people to bits. Women seem to hold grudges longer than men. I've noticed this very often in pastors' families. The pastor may be criticized by people, and he tends to get it worked out in meetings and things like that. But the woman often is like like the Dead Sea. All the water goes in and nothing goes out, and she just hangs on to stuff. And I think as men we need to be very sensitive to that, at least that possibility in our lives. I ministered to a woman, a pastor's wife, one time, who had a very severe back problem. It was so bad that for 30 years she was really in bad shape. And when I met her, it was a real scary thing to get in and out of an automobile, because if she moved the wrong way, she'd be laid up for 3 or 4 weeks. And we prayed over her back, and nothing happened. And then, as we waited on the Lord, He led us to ask her about the things that were going on in their church, and the fact that we found out that she was carrying burdens of just about everybody in the church. She was just taking all of this stuff in, and when she was able to give other people's problems to Jesus, her back got healed immediately. And this was probably about 12 years ago or so, and she hasn't had any problem since with her back. In fact, she even fell down a big flight of steps one time, and she got to the bottom and she said, "Oh no, my back problem will be back," but it never came back. Which just taking this stuff in. Now, this has implications, very severe, serious implications for ministry, because it's real easy when we're ministering to people to take their burdens on ourselves. And I will recommend that in the ministry session. But as soon as the session is over, give Jesus those problems. And don't carry them. A number of years ago, I began to realize that most of my praying was really worrying. Has anybody ever noticed that about yourself? You know, oh God, oh God, oh God. I keep, the things that were on my mind, I just keep mentioning them to Him. And I began to see that was probably not the way it's supposed to go. I was sort of treating God as if He didn't have a very good memory. Just keep begging Him for the same thing. So I started doing something that resulted in me praying less, actually. At least praying less about individual problems, because I said, okay, God, you know what this problem is. You know that I'm really concerned about it, and so I'm going to give it to you. And every time I think of it, I'm going to give it to God, and I'm not going to keep begging for it. And that was a really good decision. So whether you're a woman or a man, if you have the gift of compassion, be sure you give the problems to Jesus. Now again, what I recommend is, in the ministry session, take those problems on your shoulders. They are yours as well as the person. But when the ministry session is over, give them to Jesus, and don't carry other people's problems. Men are often not so compassionate, and yet, again, there are plenty of exceptions to these things. Oh, I was mentioning during the break to somebody that I have a teaching assistant at Fuller, a woman who is more similar to my emotional stuff than to this stereotype of women that point out. And her husband is very emotional. These two are just about reversed. He talks things out, she thinks them through, and then comes up with a conclusion. And every once in a while, I sort of infer that she's behaving like a woman, and she kind of smiles and reminds me that she handles things a lot more like I do than like the sort of stereotype of women. So there are plenty of exceptions to this, and so don't take it as totally accurate for everybody. A compassionate man can often make more allowances than a woman for those who have done him wrong. This again relates to feeling grudges. A man will often stuff his feelings and get ulcers. A woman will often be more open about certain of her feelings and give her husband ulcers. No. A woman will say to her husband, "Don't just sit there, worry," kind of thing. She'll get them off her shoulders. I just can't. One of the things that bothers me most about my wife is, she gets all upset, and then it's over. We get kind of angry at each other, and then it's over in about 10 minutes, and she's all sunshine. I got 2 more days of fretting before I'm over it. And this really bothers me. One time we were going to she teaches at Biola University, and we were going to a retreat put on by the students of the university. And I don't know, we got in some kind of an argument in the car on the way up. And I was really put out at her. I forget what she did, but it really bothered me. And so when I get put out at her, like I said, I've got about 2 days of being out of sorts before I get over it. I eventually get over it. But we got to the retreat, and soon after we got there, these kids called a communion service. Now this was a real bummer, because you know, I know you don't go into a communion service with, you know, with this kind of, you know, upset and, you know, anger and bitterness and all that kind of thing. I knew I had to get rid of that before I could take communion. Well, I figured, you know, I thought maybe I could escape, but that wasn't going to work. So finally, I just sort of gritted my teeth and I said, "Okay, God, I forgive her," you know, and then I was okay to take communion. But this business of being angry and then sort of dumping your anger and you're all over it, it just really puzzles me, and that's my dear wife. I envy her. I have a hard time getting over it that quickly, except when I have to have a communion service. Problems with expectations, the next thing, sexual expectations. Notice this, the influence of Hollywood is a real problem because Hollywood puts men's sexuality on women. Yeah, you might want to think about that. You've got men producers here, and you know they load their fantasies onto the women actresses, and so you've got women who are aggressive or, you know, very much into to physical sex, and this is, you know, this then kind of trains guys growing up into thinking that women are as sex-minded as they are, and that think about the disruption in relationships that brings. Women, because men expect their wives to be like somebody on the screen. Second thing, expecting our mate to have the same need as we do. Man expecting wives to need sex like he does. The studies show women just like to be held close, and men like intercourse. And I won't ask for a show of hands on that one. But women puzzled why their guy wants more than just hugging. Well, mark it in your books, gals, that he does expect more than just hugging. I didn't have to say that; you knew that already. Now, there are expectations arising from schooling, and I mentioned this before. Girls are trained to think like boys. This may or may not work. Even when it works in school, girls are not completely converted to male logic usually. We're taught to, this again I think is a kind of a tyranny. And then of course in school and everything else we're taught to compete with each other, and then of course we marry each other. See, about the only kind of relationship we have between boys and girls in places like school is competition. And now of course, you get the little kids playing soccer, and you've got little girls and little boys playing on the same team, which is kind of interesting because you watch. I've got 14 grandkids, and we've got them at all ages, from 19 on down to 1, and some in the middle are playing soccer, and you watch these kids out there playing soccer, and you see the guys running up and down, and little girls in a little, 2 or 3 little girls talking to each other over here. The game goes back and forth, past them. They're relating, kind of thing. The boys are competing, and the parents are yelling, Jennifer, get in there, Huh? And then it happens, of course, when they're playing baseball too. You see the little girls, they're talking with each other. But the whole thing is competitive, going through school, and of course then as you move into adolescence, girls start looking beautiful, and they've already done better in grades, and us guys were tripping over our feet, and all these kinds of things. I remember in college courting my wife. This was back this is the Midwest, and this was up in the Chicago area, and we'd be walking along. If there was a little patch of ice somewhere, I'd fall. I'd hit that ice and fall right at her feet. That's really embarrassing. She never fell. I don't think this is fair, actually. Kind of thing. I mean, the girls not only look better, they're more conscientious, get better grades and everything. And we get hammered down as guys. Then you marry one, boy, I mean, the competition doesn't necessarily stop. So it's hard to turn that competitiveness off when we marry. Now, expectations of a wife towards her husband. In her language, she expects leadership, tenderness, consideration, expects to be appreciated, and sometimes guys are just afraid or not really good at leading or whatever, and not good at some of these things, and maybe frustrated in job or for other reasons, and they carry this frustration home. And when you're feeling bad, you lash out at the person nearest to you, and so a lot of times wives get lashed out at when it wasn't their fault at all. Then expectations of husband towards wife: encouragement, appreciation, sexual interest, tenderness, honor. Now, a few things about how this should affect ministry. We need to understand a lot of these things in order to better deal with the issues. The way issues need to be treated relates to the unique characteristics and needs of the sexes. And we need to understand these things about ourselves as well. And we're not simply talking about understanding the people that we minister to, but understanding where we are too, because every ounce of us is either male or female. It's probably not too much of a surprise that men tend to understand men and women understand women better. I see Kevin and I were having a little conversation back here. Relating, bonding, took about 2 minutes. Now we understood that, didn't we, Kevin? I mean, we got a lot done. We, said hi, and so we're good brothers now, aren't we? Yeah. Good. This may mean that a woman is the best person to minister to a woman, and a man the best person to minister to a man. But don't automatically assume that, because a lot of times the best person to minister to a woman is a man, and a lot of times the best person to minister to a man is a woman. And so be careful of just making that a generalization. However, we do recommend when there's cross-sexual ministry that there be another person there, preferably of the sex of the person being ministered to. But men and women are made for each other, so this may mean that a person of the opposite sex, okay, I said that. Women often seem especially sensitive to men's needs. My guess is that women are more sensitive to men's needs than men are to women's needs. Is that the way? Any guys that would back me up? I notice the women are all nodding yes. But, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm getting a lot of support from the men here. But strangely, often a man will confess more to a woman, or a woman more to a man than to a person of the same sex, which might indicate a kind of a competitive thing here, feeling less competition from the person of the opposite sex. We have to protect ourselves from emotional attachments. If we don't feel that our own needs are being met at home, we can be vulnerable to temptation, so watch that. Watch out where and when we meet with someone of the opposite sex. Watch out for a client fixating him or herself on you to meet unmet needs. I'm sort of at the age now when all the young girls want to call me daddy or grandpa or something like that, and that's okay, but it has to be kept in bounds. I've got daughters all over the world, kind of people that have adopted me as their dad. Probably some that I don't even know about, but have to watch that doesn't go too far. And as I said, it's always good to have somebody assisting. Compassion is an absolute requirement. Caring and tenderness like that of Jesus. And people need to be able to listen sensitively. Now, back on the subject of knowing ourselves, using this kind of material or whatever to know ourselves, we need to be aware if there are particular needs in our lives. We need to be as aware of them as possible, lest in a ministry situation we kind of unconsciously project ourselves or get ourselves into a relationship that would really not be a good idea. And it's not any great news to any of us that the enemy is very anxious to mess up our lives. And if you can mess up somebody who is ministering to somebody else by getting them sexually involved with each other, or even just a kind of a codependent relationship, he'll do that. And we don't need one more Christian to fall. The enemy's been very successful in that tactic. Now, the minister needs to be able to listen. And this is important, especially for us guys. And as we listen, to not be too quick to jump in with our own experience. We've had people leading ministry who would start listening to the person and then connect something in their own experience with what's going on in the person's life, and use up most of the time talking about their own experience. Now, this probably comes out of some unconscious need that needs to be recognized and stifled at that point, and put on the side. I mean, if the person leading the ministry needs ministry, okay, that should be taken care of at another time. Now, men may need to listen to women longer than we like to. And some of us haven't gotten a lot of practice at home. And yet allowing the person to go on and on and on is often not really productive. Good to listen to about 10 minutes of a person's story and then start to deal with the stuff that's come up during that 10 minutes, and then once that's dealt with, to go back. So getting more of the story in chunks as we go along. At point F, the person doing the ministry should not show shock no matter what comes up. You think of the person, somebody tells a story, oh, wow, that's terrible, and the person saying, I don't think this person can help me at all, kind of a deal. Over and over again, a person will share something with me, and they'll say, I hope I'm not shocking you, and I say, no, I've heard it before. Oh, you've heard this before? I say, yeah, there's hardly any problem I haven't already heard a dozen times, kind of a thing. But there's somehow or other there's more confidence apparently when the person doesn't feel shocked. Sympathy, yes. And again, I'm recommending there's a problem that I kind of alluded to a while back. Some people in ministry just hold themselves back so much that it's almost like the person is being ministered to by a machine. Yeah, don't be a machine. I'm saying be totally with that person during the session, but don't carry it home. See? But be with that person. And if you're if you keep looking at your watch or distracted by whatever, that the person picks this up, and you lose your ability to help the person. And then the minister should not get too emotional. We've had some people, in ministry just break down crying and sobbing. They're not going to be much help to the person if they're a basket case, where the client is handing the minister a box of Kleenex, kind of thing. And yet, quite often, it's hard to hold back the tears. Even as stifled as my emotions are, I get teary when I hear I remember one time ministering to a young lady in a group of about 35 or so sitting in a circle. Her story was so sad. I was hanging on to myself pretty well, but I looked around and the whole group, they were passing the Kleenex box around to the whole group. But I don't know when I've ever heard a sadder story than this poor lady. So to feel for the person, even show your feelings, but not be over emotional, and certainly not to the point of losing the person's confidence. But don't act hardened either. Now, specific issues, and here we can move into discussion pretty quickly, just to run down the list. Need for affection or attention. A lot of people that have been feel they've been neglected by their parents. How many of you fit into this category? I feel like your parents neglected you. Now, notice we say feel like it. Sometimes it was not really parental neglect, but it sure felt like it. Especially, if a younger sibling came along or something like that, and we didn't get the attention that we've been used to, and so on. So that's a very important factor in many of our lives, as well as in the lives of those that we minister to. Abandonment. And oftentimes a person feeling abandoned because a parent died. Why did Daddy leave me? And even though the person may be an adult, there's a little child inside that's feeling that Daddy wanted to leave and therefore he left, and it must have been my fault. That kind of thing. Abandonment is a very serious and very common kind of a thing. Abuse by father, physical, emotional, sexual, much too common. Shame and guilt. Anybody that was conceived out of wedlock is probably going to need help with the shame issue, or anybody that's been abused. Deal with abortion. There's a mystical spiritual relationship in the family, and anybody who has had an abortion is guilty of murder, and will automatically get a demon. You will always find a demon in somebody who's had an abortion, unless it's been kicked out. But you also always find a deep wound because they've severed a bonding that God brings about between a parent and a child. Sexual issues, homosexuality, look for the human cause as well as recognize that there'll be a demon there. Pornography, men being visual. Pornography is extremely common and very common among Christian professionals, unfortunately. Kept kind of secret, but gives a real, wide open channel for the enemy to get in, and you'll almost always find demonization there as well. Masturbation is related to sex drive, but I think the problem is if it's addictive, I don't think masturbation in and of itself is a sin. My favorite sex book has a chapter entitled "Masturbation, Gift of God," and they take, and you may or may not agree with me, but his take on this is that God made us so that when we're under circumstances where we cannot fulfill our sexual needs in the normal way, God made us so that we could relieve ourselves. I'm probably in trouble with some of you on that, but I can't tell you the freedom that comes to, especially to men when they begin to see things in that light rather than as the church has so often taught. Fantasy, that is a problem. This usually goes with masturbation, and Jesus, of course, spoke against fantasizing, and that needs to be dealt with. Adultery and promiscuity and so on. Attempted or planned suicide, a big issue. You'll always find the spirit of death where somebody has planned or attempted suicide. And then anger, rage, bitterness, and so on. Control or manipulation. You find this a lot in superior women, where a woman has to be in control of a lot of things, and the enemy somehow is able to push it beyond control to manipulation. And so, and then using guilt. I saw in the I saw a sign on a writing on a sweatshirt one time. A lady was wearing it. It said, "My mother's a travel agent. She's always sending me on guilt trips." And a lot of people use guilt to control. The studies of communication, studies of guilt, show that guilt is a very powerful motivator, but for a very short period of time. And it stores up a big reaction later on. And there may be some here who have been controlled in their growing up years by guilt, and you may have gone completely off the tracks at some point in your life just in reaction to that. Now, this last part is not developed, but if you're dealing with people of other societies, be sure you deal with family curses. And what I mean by family curses, if you have an Asian, we deal with a lot of Koreans and Japanese and Chinese. Generation after generation, the children have been dedicated to enemy gods, to spirits and gods, and those demons get passed down from generation to generation. And you'll almost always find a spirit that goes by the father's name and a spirit that goes by the mother's name. You've got those two streams going in there. Likewise with any of these others: American Indians, Hispanics, Asian, Africans. A lot of what we do in deep level healing, a lot of it works with people of other societies. I've traveled quite a lot in Korea and Taiwan and Asian countries, done a little bit of this kind of ministry in Africa, a lot in Switzerland, and a lot of it works works cross-culturally, but we need a lot more testing of things, what works and what doesn't work cross-culturally. Okay, where are your questions or comments? I've shot my wad here. Yes?
What are the theological or biblical basis for ancestor demons, generational curses?
Okay, the question is, what are theological, biblical bases for ancestral demons, generational curses? The one place that I would, or one of the places I would point to would be in the Ten Commandments, where it says the sins of the fathers are visited on the sons to the third and fourth generation. And even though the reference there is to sin, the fact that we find that whenever a person wallows in sin, stays in sin, that this gives a legal right to demons to come in. And so that's one thing. Throughout the Old Testament, then, God warns against the paganism of the people of Palestine, and it talks about children passing through the fire. This is a dedication rite, where often they would take an animal and cut it in two, and there'll either be a fire there, or the person would pass between the two parts of the animal. And this kind of a ritual then dedicates people to the enemy gods. And what we found over and over again is that the demons get inherited by people. One of the big areas that we find are in Americans is people whose fathers or grandfathers have been Freemasons. In Freemasonry, over and over again, we find demons of Freemasonry in the children who have never been a part of that organization, but their fathers or grandfathers have been. And again, with Koreans or with Chinese or Japanese, when we're dealing with demons, just to challenge the families. Recently, I was working with a Korean woman, and I asked her her father's family name, of course, was Kim. And 3/4 of Korean society has Kim as their name, and her mother's name was Choi. And so I said, "Is there a spirit here named Kim?" And came right up. "Where did you come from?" "Oh, from her father." "How many generations back?" "Oh, a long, long time back." And then they often say, "I've been here a long time, you can't get me out. She belongs to me." And I say, "Well, what about this decision that she made to follow Jesus Christ?" The spirit will usually say, "I didn't like that. I don't like that at all." I said, "Well, she belongs to Jesus, and you're trespassing." And so then we kick them out. So experientially, we find the demons there, and I think behind the kinds of things that are said and done in the Old Testament, you've got the assumption that places are dedicated, people are dedicated, and that this then gives the enemy rights in people, and those things have to be dealt with. Other questions or comments? Yes. We'll go right across the row there.
My husband is not a professed believer, and his grandmother was a devout Buddhist, and I suspect that she probably dedicated her
Right.
grandsons. Now they were married, and I've gone through the healing ministry, and so how does that work in our spiritual relationship?
Yeah. Yeah, the question for the sake of the tape, her husband is not a believer, and his grandmother was a Buddhist, and he was probably dedicated. The custom in Korea as well as in China is for mother or grandmother to write down the exact date and time of the person's birth and the person's name, and to take it to a temple, and that dedicates it. They may go through a bigger ritual, but even that little thing is enough to do it. And so we can assume that the demons have been passed down from parent to child to your husband. Now you say you've gone through deep healing. You need to claim the protection of Jesus Christ from whatever his stuff is, and I think that takes care of it. And of course, be loving and winning, and if you ever get a chance to minister to him, or if somebody else does, to go for that. Well, go for family spirits on both sides. And how about you? Has anybody dealt with the family spirits in you?
Yeah, but I think that I get disturbed in my sleep a lot.
Okay.
And I just wake up, and he tells me that he sees a demon in his dream. And
Okay.
I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would just put my hands over his shoulder, and I would just pray. And there's all of a sudden fear just comes over me, and I feel something's in the air.
Okay.
And I'm just praying. So I'm just trying to find out, do I have more power? How does that
Yeah. Yeah, okay, she's disturbed in her sleep, she says, and oftentimes he feels, he has a dream or something, and he feels a presence there, and then you put your hand on, and then you feel an evil presence as well. Get help. You've got some stuff there to deal with. Now, one of the things you can do, and maybe you're already doing it, is regularly just claim the power of Jesus over your bedroom, and of course over all the rest of the house as well, and assert your authority as a believing wife. 1 Corinthians 7:14 says, the believing wife sanctifies her husband, otherwise their children would be unclean. I think that gives you specific authority in that case. And if you assert it, then the enemy has to obey. If you don't assert it, then he can take advantage of you. But that authority of the believing wife has been a very helpful thing for me several times in ministering to people with situations like yours, or in some cases even drawing demons out of a husband through the wife. You know, ministering to the wife and out of a believing husband, not an unbelieving husband. I haven't. Well, yeah, I did try that one time, and I said to the demon, "Did we get some demons out of her husband?" He said, "Yeah, but not out of her mother-in-law." So I don't know quite what the status of that was. Judy.
Could you address the issue of men and women doing ministry related to different cultures? For instance, Caucasian men doing ministry, for instance, with an Asian woman, and how the cultures are so different. So just because we assume it's to be one way, in ministry may not be that way at all.
Okay, she asked me to talk about a Caucasian man ministering to an Asian woman. Yeah. I'm not sure what specific thing you wanted to do.
For instance, the ministry session I had talked to you about before, where the man leading ministry was speaking to the person that was Asian about their self-esteem, and with the thoughts that maybe their size was an issue, that they wanted to be, size 10, perfect 10, when the person became offended because in their culture, the way they looked was very beautiful, and that's what...
Okay. Yeah, so dealing with things from a typical American point of view, and Judy mentions dealing with an Asian woman or South Pacific woman. In your society, a very large woman is a very beautiful woman, holy. Okay, that's Samoa, and if we assume, say this is a big woman, we assume that she may be feeling bad about her size. That's not likely to be true. More likely, she's feeling very happy about her size. One of the things that that I found can happen is, like, if we invite Jesus to minister to the person, it just seems like kind of an automatic thing that as Americans we would say, "Would you like a hug from Jesus?" Well, Asian people are not huggy unless they've been Americanized. I remember in Japan one time, after I talked about this in a sermon, a young lady came up and threw her arms around me. She says, "I spent a year in America, I love to hug." Her mother just about dropped on the floor, kind of thing, because these are no-touch cultures, kind of thing. But it's much better to invite Jesus to come and maybe bless the person by putting his hand on the person's forehead, or something like that. And if you do a throne room kind of a thing, quite often for Americans, especially American women, we'll say, "Would you like to sit in Jesus' lap?" Well, that's not a real appropriate Asian thing to do. More likely, they would want to kneel down in front of him, or stand by his side, or something like that. So to be aware of these kinds of differences. If you're dealing with Asians and dealing with Asian women, always look for a mother-in-law problem. Korean or Chinese or Japanese women will usually hate their mother-in-law first and their husband second. And there's a relationship because mothers-in-law have spoiled their sons, and the son will always, if there's any kind of a conflict between wife and mother, he'll always side with mother. Which is, the wife often feels like an outsider, and Asian mothers-in-law can be nasty. I don't know if you, I noticed some Asians nodding like this. So to learn some of those kinds of things, or just to ask questions about relationships, is an important kind of thing. Now, if you're dealing with American Indians or people of American Indian background, you can assume the same thing about the generational curses or demonization being passed down from generation to generation. I don't know how many generations. Sometimes people ask me, what's the shelf life of a curse like this, a dedication. But I think at least 3 or 4 generations, because that's what it says in the 10 Commandments concerning sin, to the 3rd and 4th generation. But I think it may be more than that. When this comes up is say a person says, okay, I have an Indian in my ancestry 5 generations back. Well, I would still look for a demon. Maybe he's not there, but you can find that out. Okay, other questions? Did you want to quit at 9:30? Okay.
Some people want to do it.
Okay.
Whatever, I don't want to
Anybody? We won't hold that against her, will we? I mean, that was just a little lie, wasn't it? So, yeah.
This is the only place I have authority to control everything in this world.
Yeah.
We are on home church. You mean that?
And for the sake of the world, Judy has does an excellent job, not only in this place but in a lot of other places, and we're really grateful to her. The joking that we do, there's no ill will in it. At least on my part, I hope there's. But Judy reads things between the lines that just isn't there, so no problem. Okay, why don't we close in prayer then? Father, thank you so much for all the things that you do. Lord, we're real puzzled by some of the things, though, these differences that we've been talking about between men and women. And I guess all of us agree that there should be some differences, but we do have trouble with the extent of the differences sometimes. And yet, Lord, the mandate to love doesn't say just love people that are like you. And the kind of discipline that comes from learning to love and appreciate and even laugh about characteristics that are very different. Learning to love across those divides is a very instructive and helpful thing for us. Lord, I pray that we might be helped by this discussion, helped in our own relationships with members of the opposite sex and members of the same sex, and our relationship with ourselves also, as we try to figure out things about ourselves that we may not understand. And so, Lord, in this love, to be able to relate to those close to us in a better way, and to be able to minister to people of our same sex and people of the opposite sex, and to minister more effectively, more understandingly, and in recognition of the differences. Forbid, Lord, that we would just assume that everybody is like us, and that we would, by this attempt of our society to erase sexual differences. And for those of us, Lord, who are struggling with problems of self-image that might be related to the way we think and the way we are made, those of us that have been intimidated by others, often by our parents and other significant others, because we think differently. Help us, Lord, to understand better, and even to glory in our differences, and to accept these differences as God-given, not simply man-made. So, Lord, we thank you for this opportunity and commit what we have said and done to you. We ask, Lord, that you will use it for your purposes and that you will bless each one of us in the way we use this information. And now as we part, we claim your presence and your protection. And I'm saying to enemy spirits that would like to disrupt any of our lives during the night or at all during the seminar, I'm telling you, you can't do this. I'm forbidding it. We open ourselves completely to the Holy Spirit. We claim His protection, His guidance, and His blessing tonight and throughout the seminar. So we commit ourselves and all that we've said and done to you. In the name of Jesus Christ our Lord, we pray. Amen.